Rain lashed down on the cracked asphalt road as a rusted van rumbled toward the far edge of Hollow's End, a rural town no one visits unless they have a reason, or a death wish. Inside were 5 urban explorers. Casey, the thrill-seeking leader with a large following on her livestream channel Urban Myth Hunters. Nate, the cameraman and Casey's boyfriend, cynical but loyal. Jules, the tech guy, always lugging his EMF reader and infrared camera. Lena, the skeptic, only there because Casey promised her half the ad revenue. Mark, the quiet one, obsessed with the supernatural since childhood. Their destination was St. Aurelius Church, an abandoned 18th-century Catholic church rumored to be cursed. It had been sealed for decades after a fire destroyed part of the altar in 1952. Locals claimed that before the fire, a priest had been conducting strange, midnight masses that didn't match Catholic rites. No one could explain why, during those services, parishioners were said to vanish without a trace. Arrival. The church rose out of the fog like something from a nightmare, blackened stone walls, a bell tower leaning as if it wanted to collapse, and stained glass windows shattered into jagged fangs. The heavy wooden doors were chained shut, but Casey had already brought bolt cutters. As they stepped inside, the sound of the rain died instantly, as though the walls were swallowing the storm. The air was freezing, their breath visible despite the summer night. The scent hit them next, metallic, old, and thick, like dried blood. Dust blanketed the pews, but at the altar, 6 candles flickered with fresh wax pooling beneath them. Lena, okay, who lit these? Mark, maybe someone still uses this place. Jules, or something. First signs. Nate set up the camera while Jules swept the room with his EMF meter. The needle twitched violently near the altar. Casey zoomed in on the candles for her livestream audience, thousands now watching in real time. That's when they heard it, faint chanting. Gregorian, but distorted, like a recording played backward. It came from beneath their feet. Blueprints said there's no basement, Nate whispered. Mark spotted a square outline in the floorboards behind the altar, a rotting wooden trapdoor, half hidden under a dusty rug. It groaned as they pried it open, releasing a wave of icy air so cold it burned their skin. A spiral staircase descended into darkness. The crypt. The steps ended in a vaulted chamber lined with human skulls. The walls were carved with Latin prayers, but the words were wrong, twisted into curses that made Lena's head pound just from reading them. In the center stood a stone altar, blackened by fire. Beside it hung a tattered priest's robe, still smelling faintly of incense, and something rotting. The chanting grew louder, but there was no one there. Nate's camera screen flickered, and for a split second, the feed showed dozens of black-robed figures sitting in invisible pews, their heads bowed, their hands clasped in skeletal prayer. When the image stabilized, the room was empty again. The truth. Mark, pale and shaking, whispered the legend. Father Matthias, the last priest of St. Aurelius, had grown desperate during a plague that struck the town. He tried to invoke a divine miracle, but in his desperation, he turned to forbidden rites. The ritual, the midnight mass of the damned, was said to open a door for angels, but instead it welcomed something else. The congregation that attended his final mass never came out. The townsfolk sealed the church, locking the priest and his guests inside forever. But the mass still continued. Every year, at midnight on the anniversary of that night, the congregation needed new souls to join their eternal service. The trap. Jules checked his watch, 11:59 p.m. The chanting swelled, shaking the crypt walls. The candles upstairs extinguished all at once. Footsteps echoed above them, dozens, maybe hundreds. They bolted up the spiral staircase, but when they reached the church floor, the pews were filled. Hooded figures sat in perfect rows, swaying gently, their faces hidden. The heavy church doors slammed shut behind them. Possession. One figure rose from the front pew, the priest. His face was half burned, skin hanging in ribbons, his eyes empty sockets that leaked black smoke. He raised his hands. The figures in the pews turned their heads in unison, revealing faces pale as marble, eyes pitch black. Their lips moved in sync with the chanting. One by one, the explorers felt their bodies stiffen. Nate dropped the camera. Lena clawed at her throat. Casey screamed as her vision blurred and the hooded figures began to merge with them, shadowy forms seeping into their mouths, noses, eyes. The livestream. The next morning, the livestream replay still trended online. Viewers watched the explorers scream, fight, and finally, sit down in the pews, swaying with the hooded congregation. In the final moments, Father Matthias stepped in front of the camera. His burned face leaned close until only the sockets of his eyes filled the screen. He whispered in perfect clarity, "See you next year." The feed cut to black. Final scene. 2 weeks later, a pair of teenagers dared each other to break into St. Aurelius. Inside, they found the pews covered in dust, except for the first 2 rows. 5 new figures in black robes sat there, heads bowed, lips moving in time with the silent chanting. And the candles on the altar were freshly lit. End.